Borrowed sugar, stolen kisses. I first smelled the lie on my own collar. Vanilla, yes, but not the bakery kind. This was the expensive ghost of vanilla, the kind that arrived with a low hum of sandalwood and something faintly smoky, like a match the moment before it dies. My wife, Tessa, doesn't wear perfume. She says it clouds her thinking. The scent on my collar was a stranger's decision, left like a fingerprint. I turned the collar toward the window and let late light comb through the fabric. The smell didn't weaken. Neither did the feeling that the air in our apartment had tilted a few degrees. It was a small thing to begin with, but small things have a way of multiplying when you leave them alone. Tessa texted, "Running late, campaign emergency, don't wait up." I replied with a thumbs up like a man who knows where he stands. Then I went to the kitchen to make dinner I didn't want. I cut tomatoes the way I'd seen my father do it, slowly like reading. That's when the knock came. 3 percussion taps, practiced and light. "Hi," my neighbor said through the door, her voice already smiling. "Do you happen to have sugar? My jars are full of everything except the thing I need." Mara lives across the hall. She moved in last month with a crate of plants and classical vinyl that she plays low, so the strings travel like breath under the door. She teaches a style of dance I've never heard of. It involves a lot of bare feet and laughter. I opened the door and she was exactly herself. Hair pinned in that casual way that isn't casual at all. A sweater the color of storm clouds. Toes tipped in pale polish like unbitten almonds. "I can pay you in muffins," she added. "Or scandalous gossip, I have both." "Sugar's fine," I said, and I don't know if I imagined the warm flicker in her eyes when mine rested on her mouth. She stepped into the doorway and looked past me at the cutting board. "You cook like you mean it." "I cut like I hesitate," I said, "which is the opposite of cooking." She laughed, a soft spill of sound, and I remembered I hadn't heard laughter in this kitchen in weeks. She set an empty jar on the counter and I poured sugar in, the white grains hushing down like new snow. She thanked me and reached for the jar at the same time I did, and we did that impossible dance of politely retreating and accidentally touching. Her hand grazed mine. I felt the entire kitchen shift toward that point of contact. An invisible magnet turned on for a second. "Dangerous commodity," she said, lifting the jar. "Thanks for the loan, Ethan." When the door clicked shut behind her, the air I'd been pretending not to watch went still. I looked down at my collar again. The stranger's vanilla had not moved. The next clue arrived in my car, fallen between the seat and the console. A silk scarf, red as a rumor. I recognized it the way you recognize a tune you don't know you know. It was the color of the dress Tessa wore on the night we met, a red that was all invitation and zero apology. But the scarf wasn't hers, or if it was, I'd never seen it. I lifted it out by 2 fingers and it slipped across my skin with a shiver that felt indecent. My knuckles tightened on the wheel. You can't accuse a person with a scarf. You can't accuse the ghost of a perfume. You can, however, notice that your wife's smiles have started taking the elevator while the rest of her takes the stairs. You can notice that her phone has acquired a password and a tilt, always away from you, like a sunflower choosing a new sun. You can notice that the intimacy of silence between you has become the dread of it. I tucked the scarf into the glove compartment and drove to the hotel printed on the next clue, a credit card charge on our shared statement for Aurora, with a description that sounded like a script: sweets, packages, amenities. Tessa had never said amenities in her life. She called them extras like most people. I parked 2 blocks away and told myself I was just verifying a detail the way I do for work. I'm a photographer. I watch small things. I am paid to hold my breath. The Aurora glittered with an idea of elegance that was a bit too proud of itself. In the lobby were people who knew how to look like a painting. I didn't see Tessa, which felt like a reprieve I hadn't earned. But I saw the red scarf, a bright comet looped around the neck of a woman whose hair was a deep winter brown. She crossed the marble and claimed the hand of a man, with Tessa's laugh in his pocket. The elevators opened like stage curtains and took them both away. I didn't get in the next one. I waited while the fountain forgot me and the concierge pretended not to notice that I was learning how a heart can sound like a hollow stone. Some stories ask you to scream your role, others ask you to whisper it. I left without making a sound. On the street, rain began like applause far away. I could have called my friend Mark, who believes all problems can be solved by loud music and louder advice. I could have told my sister, who would have arrived with wine and a brief on pride. Instead, I walked home in the thin rain and counted the windows that looked back at me. When I reached our floor, I stood with my key in the lock long enough to hear music from behind Mara's door. It slipped into the hall like warm breath. The melody was simple and slow, the way someone looks at you when they're being careful. My own door swung open to a dark apartment and a note left on the kitchen counter. "Emergency meeting turned into dinner," it said. "Don't wait up." The handwriting was rounder than usual, as if the letters had been held. I set the note beside the tomatoes I'd abandoned to the rain and went to the sink to wash my hands, which still knew the texture of silk. Sleep was a rumor that didn't come true. At 3, Tessa slid into bed smelling not of our detergent but of something more expensive, a story with too many pages. I lay very still and memorized the shape of her breathing. My chest ached in that specific way pain does when it's trying to be useful, sharp enough to wake you, not sharp enough to cut what should be kept. In the morning she made coffee in her new careful way and asked if I'd mind taking my camera to a charity gala for her agency that evening. "Just a few photos," she said, patting the request with a smile that was all habit and no home. I said yes, because saying no would have been a confession I wasn't ready for. She kissed the air near my cheek and left. I spent the day pretending to choose lenses while I played back the lobby in my head. The woman with the scarf had moved like a rehearsal. The man had kept a hand in his pocket the way men do when they want to touch something inside and decide not to. In the afternoon, I wrote an email to the Aurora asking if they'd found a scarf in the lobby. They replied promptly. Yes, a red silk scarf was turned in this morning. I thanked them and said I could pick it up, which I did, because I needed to hold the evidence of my own restraint. The gala was held at the Comet, a glass-walled venue that makes everyone look like they're visiting their best self. I did my job with professional patience, moving through sequins and suits, catching laughter at the edge and eyes at the end. I found Tessa near the stage, her hand on the arm of a man in a navy suit whose watch gleamed like a clean alibi. He wasn't the lobby man. I felt ridiculous relief that Tessa's betrayals came with variety. She saw me and lit up in a way that warmed my ribs. The warmth made me cruel. "Who's that?" I asked later, as we stood on a balcony where the city pretended to be a necklace. "Adrian," she said, "big client, don't be weird." "I'm not weird." It sounded like a lie children tell when they've been seen. She leaned on the railing. Her dress breathed like a patient animal. "You're quiet," she said, not in the way that invites talk but in the way that warns it off. My phone buzzed. A message from Mara, "Cake finished. Do you want your sugar back with interest?" I smiled at the screen before I remembered to stop. Tessa looked at me and then at my pocket, curiosity with a knife in it. "A client," I said, because apparently we were talking in that dialect now. On my way home, I texted Mara that I'd take her up on the cake. She answered that her door was unlocked, which either meant trust or danger or both. I knocked anyway because I was not a person who walked into other people's lives unannounced. She opened wearing a shirt soft enough to make the word shirt seem ungenerous and a skirt that moved like water in a small bowl. "You look like the end of an advertisement," she said. "One where the man chooses the better life instead of the better car." "Fired for honesty," I said. She brought out 2 plates and a cake that looked like it had learned kindness somewhere. "Taste," she commanded. The fork found the sort of lemon that keeps secrets for hours. She watched me watch it. It felt intimate in the way being read to does. "Dance with me," she said then, voice dropping into conspiratorial warmth. Music slid out from her small speaker, a slow thing that invited shoulders to make up their minds. I started to protest out of habit and then let the protest go. I'd spent months resisting touch because I didn't trust what it would turn me into. But Mara's version of dancing was an act of attention more than closeness. She stood 12 inches away and moved like a language I might already know. When she reached her hands toward me, they hovered like question marks. "Here?" she asked, and took my wrists lightly, turning them as if to see where a watch would have left skin pale. "Breathe," she said, and when I did, she mirrored it, her chest rising with mine until breath itself felt like choreography. "I'm married," I said to the air between us, because I needed to say it to someone who would honor it. "I know," she answered, and the gentleness in those 2 words almost undid me. "This is just contact, like plugging in a lamp that somehow was not plugged in for too long." We moved. My palms learned the heat hovering an inch from her waist, a lesson in restraint so precise it felt decadent. Her eyes stayed with mine and I forgot to be a problem. When the song ended, she didn't step closer. She reached for my collar, for the place where a stranger's perfume still lived. She leaned in, not to kiss, but to breathe there. "You smell like a story," she said, "one you're afraid to hear." I left before I turned a corner I couldn't return from. At my door I paused. The corridor held the quiet of after. Inside I wrote Tessa a note that said, "Breakfast tomorrow," like a man still trying to set the table for the version of us that didn't flinch. She replied from the bedroom where she'd returned without my noticing. "Early. I have a call." At breakfast she talked about deliverables, numbers that need to move, people who need to be convinced. I watched her mouth form words we don't use at home and wondered whose words she saved for someone else. When she stood to leave, I reached for the red silk scarf I'd brought home from the Aurora and set it on the table between us. She went very still, like an animal hearing a branch break in a forest it didn't know it was in. "I found it," I said, which was true. "It's not yours." "Where did you—" She stopped, recalculated. "Ethan, please." "Please what?" Her hands closed palm to palm as if she were arguing with a door. "Please don't make this ugly." Ugly is a word people use when they've already done something. I looked at her and I did not raise my voice. I did not list every small thing. "I don't know the rules," I said. "I'm tired of finding out after I've already broken them." Tessa's eyes filled with water they didn't let fall. She sat. She told me enough. It was a client and it was a mistake and then it wasn't, and it had happened in a space that pretended not to be a lie because it was rented by the hour. She said she didn't come home because she didn't want me to see her like that. I asked which that, and she said confused, and the room shrank to a 2-seater. "Do you want this marriage?" I asked, quiet the way the last shovel of dirt is quiet. She looked at her hands. "I want it," she said. "I don't know if that counts." "It doesn't," I said, and the calm that arrived surprised me with how faithful it felt. "I can't be a thing you want." We agreed, in the brittle way people do when they stand on a floor that isn't theirs anymore, to press pause. She packed a bag with the brisk efficiency of someone grabbing only what won't break. She left the perfume behind like a thrown voice. That night I didn't go to Mara. I went to the river. I walked until my legs understood that moving forward is not the same as chasing. When I reached the pedestrian bridge with its chain-link confessionals, the locks people clip on to pretend their feelings can't be picked, I stopped. The moon was a fingernail you keep when you don't want to bite anymore. I slept like a man who has finally put down something heavy and isn't yet sure what to do with his hands. In the morning, there was a note taped to my door in handwriting I already liked. "I'm on my fire escape if you need to borrow air," it said. I made coffee and brought 2 mugs across the hall. The fire escape had collected a halo of plant pots. Rosemary brushed my wrist as if to remind me that the world is still edible. Mara sat with her knees up and her hair loose. The city laid out behind her like a map folded how only locals know to fold it. "I told the truth," I said as I handed her the mug, and my voice felt new in my mouth. "How did it fit?" she asked. "Like clothes I forgot I owned." She smiled without teeth, the kind that reaches the eyes first. We sat without touching because touch is louder after silence. She told me stories that were not advice. A class where no one could find the beat, a grandmother who taught her to peel peaches with a spoon, the night she decided she'd move to this building because the hallway smelled like rain. I listened. In the space her voice cleared, I found room for my own. "I wanted to kiss you," I said finally, because lies prefer dark rooms and I was tired of keeping them comfortable. "I know," she said, like a hand on a fevered forehead. "I wanted to kiss you too. We didn't. That's a kind of intimacy people don't sell enough postcards for." I laughed and the laughter didn't scrape. The breeze tugged at a leaf near her ankle and I had the sudden urge to place it back the way you tuck a strand of hair behind an ear. Instead, I said, "Dance with me," and she did. We stood on the narrow metal shelves of the fire escape and let our bodies negotiate the geometry. No neighbors stared. The city hummed a bass line. Her palms found the space above my chest without landing. My hands hovered at the small of her back, a respectful spell. "You feel like you," she said into the air between us, "which is rarer than people admit." We didn't kiss. The possibility felt like a book placed spine up on a table, saving the page for later. When we parted, I felt rinsed by the restraint itself, like clean water is sometimes more sensual than honey. Tessa texted me 3 times that day. The first was logistics. The second, apologies. The third, a photograph of the lake we used to rent a cabin near, as if a landscape could arbitrate. I answered the first, acknowledged the second, and left the third alone. I was learning the difference between nostalgia and direction. That evening I returned to the Comet with my camera and no assignment. I wanted to see the city throw its lights again and survive it. As I moved through the crowd, people arranged themselves in small, generous tableaus. A woman fixed her friend's earring with the seriousness of a surgeon. A man pressed his forehead to the glass and made a wish without witnesses. From the balcony, I watched cars sew red thread down the avenue. When I came home, Mara's door was half open. "Hey," she said from inside, "do you mind helping me move this mirror? It's made of spite. I can't lift it alone." We braced it together, hand on frame, the heavy object teaching us collaboration. Once it was upright, we stood reflected, 2 people the mirror didn't mock. She bit her lip, just the edge, just once. I wanted to touch that lip the way you press a thumb to wet ink to see if the letter has dried. Instead, I lifted my hand to her cheek and let my knuckles skim the warm air above her skin. "We'll take this slow," I said. "We already are," she replied. On my way out, I remembered the scarf in my pocket. I didn't need it anymore. I draped it over my chair at home like a surrendered flag. Later, I would mail it back to the hotel with a note that said only, "No longer needed." For now, it lay there like a story I chose not to tell myself anymore. I slept with the window open and the city's breath in the room. In the morning, the sun arrived humbly, as if making up for the flashiness of night. I brewed coffee I intended to share and waited for the knock I knew by heart now. 3 light taps, practiced, kind. When it came, I opened the door like a man choosing heat over smoke.